Hello, how are you? Welcome to the channel. I am still trying to figure out the software. That's kind of what I was talking about today. Just the direction of this channel and how I'm going to go with this. In the past, I've had some conversations where, oh, hello, welcome, Zduke, if I'm saying that properly. Okay, see, now the chat's showing up, and that's what I'd like to see, so that way I don't have to read everything. Thank you for participating and helping me to see my chat box. Sweet. Okay, that's what I wanted. I am doing awesome. Today is a wonderful, beautiful day. Good. I hope that's your response to that. You're doing good. I live in the desert, and we got rain last night. First time in like 200 some odd days, so it's beautiful. It's nice, wet, cold day, but it's good to have those every now and then. I'm kind of setting up this channel, just trying to figure some things out. I'll be honest, I'm a little new to Twitch, but I am not new to holistic healing or energy work, if you will. That's usually what I call it, or energy healing. A couple different modalities. You have Reiki, you've got Rapid Eye. The one that I've studied is called bioenergetic synchronization technique. There's eye patching. I don't know, there's tons. There's acupuncture. All of these are different, again, I'd call them energy working or energy healing modalities, because I believe that there's a part where the science and the woo-woo or the magic kind of are coming together, and we're now just being able to realize them both side by side. And so that's what I want to do with this channel, help promote awareness to anybody. I know for myself, at least the way that I look at it is it saved my life. Like, this stuff definitely helped me. I had really bad anxiety, things like that. Oh, thank you for the follow. Appreciate that. Esoteric. What do you mean, like ghosts? Is that what that is? I apologize. I'll have to Google that, actually. So, I'm sorry. See, and this is why I love Twitch. Is the other day I had somebody come in here and we started talking about DMT and the spirit molecule and different things like that, and it was like, oh, okay, here's some information that I had no idea. And now I've read a little bit about DMT, and it talks about how it floods your brain when you're born and when you die. I was like, okay, that's very interesting. But the gentleman told me that there's a documentary called The Spirit Molecule, and you can follow, or I was going to say follow Joe Rogan, but that's not the case. He narrates the documentary, if I remember right. It's really interesting where some of the stuff comes from. And then I started getting into, I've talked to people that have actually used DMT, experience with it, if you will, if you may. Things like energy loaded earth and that kind of stuff. Okay, so esoteric, understood by or meant for only the select few who have special knowledge or interest, belonging to a select few. Okay, so with this definition of esoteric, I would almost have to say yes and no to that. I believe there are certain people with gifts, and they have different gifts than I have, and there are certain people with, I even talk about the book Power versus Force, and in the book Power versus Force they talk about a collective consciousness or a super consciousness, if you will, where you have a knowing without knowing that you know it. It's just this information kind of feels like it pops in your head or pushed in your head, and or even sometimes we say, I have a gut feeling about this. Upon this research, something that I thought was very interesting was you actually have brain cells, if I understand this right, in your heart and in your guts. So your large intestine has brain cells in it, and that's what gives you that gut feeling, in a sense, is those brain cells trying to send a message up to you. Again, this is somewhat new for me. I'm still learning. I'm still researching this. So if you have any that you'd like to put into it, I think that's great. Again, thank you for being here, and thank you for asking these wonderful questions. I think this stuff is just fascinating for me. I love it. I would like to get this information out there to more people that can see it and understand it. I don't know what an energy loaded earth is. I mean, I know the earth has its own biofield, if you will, just like our bodies do. Energy force, if you will, that's around us, again, a biofield, and it reaches out to arm's length, roughly. And, that's why I've heard this before. I'm assuming most people have, but somebody stands in your bubble, and it's like, whoa, that your bubble, if you will, is your biofield. So, yeah, that's and I know again the Earth has a certain energy frequency to it. That's why I was even, I'd say recently, but it was actually quite a while ago, I was reading a study where they were talking about grounding, which is just walking on the earth barefoot, because the earth has a certain resonance to it, and so us walking on that helps us ground, or helps us get back to that frequency of the earth, as I understand it. It looks like we got a few new people, or maybe they came back. Welcome again. If you have any comments or questions, I'd love to try and answer them the best I can. Again, we're just talking about holistic healing, energy work, energy healing. I think this stuff's all fascinating. Myself, I have certified in a modality called bioenergetic synchronization technique. And the woo-woo of it that I understand, or the magic side, if you will, is that it opens all your chakras and it balances your energy and allows it to flow through your body properly. Okay, cool. That sounds fairly simple. Now, the scientific way of saying that same thing is you have a sympathetic, sympathetic and parasympathetic nervous system. Sympathetic is your fight or flight. Parasympathetic is your rest and relaxation. Both are very needed. Both are wonderful mechanisms, if you will, in the body that do awesome stuff. So the sympathetic, it's your fight or flight. You see a bear, or, I usually say a saber tooth, and I'm usually referring to ancestors. They see stuff like that, and it puts them into fight or flight, and then they can either fight or run better because most of their blood is flowing to their muscles, and just if I can say this right, the physiology of the body has changed, and again, you're running on completely different nervous system. It's very interesting how all this kind of collaborates or goes together. So anyway, you have that, and then the way that your parasympathetic, which is your rest and relaxation, works is it pulls you out of that fight or flight, and it allows the blood to flow to your intestines. I was going to say your organs. That's the word I was looking for. Sorry, all your organs and things like that. It's also really interesting too, the way that it affects your brain. So I'm assuming some of you out there have significant others, loved ones, could even be mom and dad. Let's say you get in an argument with him. It starts to get pretty heated. Well, now you've slipped into parasympathetic nervous system. You're in fight or flight. It doesn't necessarily matter what the argument's about. The fact that you're arguing and the fact that you're getting heated, if you will, is what's going to pull you into the parasympathetic nervous system. And that's something that we see a lot with B.E.S.T practitioners, or I don't know. Yeah, it's something we see. We'll put it that way. And what's great about this is with the B.E.S.T practitioners, Sorry, I lost my train of thought for a minute. What they see a lot is people stuck in the fight or flight, the parasympathetic nervous system, because, let's say they're driving to work, somebody cuts them off, they almost get in an accident. That's a scary thing. Their body's going to react by going there. You get into work, and your boss starts chewing your ass. Well, you start worrying about your job, and if you can pay bills, because, you just go with this analogy. But anyway, your boss starts shooting your ass, and so that puts you back into parasympathetic nervous system. Well, maybe you haven't been out of it at all. Maybe from the time you woke up, the car crash, maybe it's the dog barking at something neighbor that you have stress with. What we see is people get stuck in this fight or flight parasympathetic nervous system, and they stay there all day, all week, all month, and that's not healthy. That's not what we were designed for. Even I've heard it quite a bit when you lay down for bed. Some people will start worrying and start thinking about negative stuff that can happen. Well, while you're laying down in bed, you should be in sympathetic nervous system. You should be resting and relaxing. But because you keep playing these negative thought patterns in your mind, you're forcing yourself in this fight or flight. And so even when you go to bed, you're still in fight or flight, and that just exhausts the body. It's very wearing, very taxing on the body. So what we want to do is we want you to be in parasympathetic nervous system. I know sometimes I get these confused. I'm going to double check my notes just because I want to say this right, and I know there are times in the past I haven't. So, and again, I think it's better that I check my notes, even if I'm right or wrong, just because it's always, always smarter to do that, in my opinion. And then we also talked about the mortar march. Okay, so yeah, sympathetic is your fight or flight. Parasympathetic is your rest and relaxation. And this is interesting too. I'll read a little bit. Now that I'm getting into it, it talks about the physical danger. Usually, it activates the sympathetic nervous system. It's your first line of defense against real or perceived threats from the outside. So again, you're talking to your boss, something like that, and you're perceiving a threat, and so your body's going to slip into the sympathetic nervous system. And then once you're there, you start using your adrenals and things like that, and it's not super great. That's what we want to get away from. It's okay to go there when we need it. When there's actual cause for it. Oh, also back to my original analogy with the mom and dad or the spouse, loved one. Let's say you're fighting with them. You're in a fairly heated argument. Well, again, that could be a perceived threat, so slipping into defense physiology, which is not necessarily good. Another thing that the defense physiology does for you, and maybe actually I read this because the scientific will sound better than my remembering it. What it does is it makes it to where the blood doesn't flow properly. Okay, so perceived threat, or will, jumpstart your sympathetic nervous system to engage particular involuntary physiological that's activities, raising blood pressure, dilating pupils, says goose flesh, goosebumps, I guess, making it more sensitive to touch. Anyway, speed up the heart rate, and more yet, the sympathetic also slowing down signals, particularly for digestive process. So, again, it takes the major blood from your organs and it gives it to your muscles. I'm hoping that I can read that here. Your body shouldn't be using precious energy to digest food when you're running for your life or trying to lift an anvil off your foot. Okay, yeah, that makes sense. Again, going back to you're arguing with your spouse, your mom, dad, your significant other, whatever. If you're perceiving this threat, again, real or imaginary, which, with domestic violence could be real. You could really be in fear, if that makes sense. So with that, understandable. Yeah, your sympathetic nervous system, it's rerouting blood from major organs. Well, one of those organs is your brain, and so you can't think logically or very well in this fight or flight mode. So a lot of times, what I personally will do, especially after I've learned this, is if I'm in an argument with somebody, whether it's my kids or my best friend, or I don't necessarily have a significant other, but just anybody close to me, and even if they're not necessarily close to me, well, I try not to argue with strangers. That just doesn't help or get us anywhere. I try not to argue anyway. I try to, have a debate, if that makes sense. A debate, I can hear their side, they're willing to hear my side. An argument, it's trying to prove who's right. Anyway, so again, if I feel myself going there and I can see that this argument is getting heated, I will usually try to step away. I will say, thanks, but no thanks. Not even that. I'll just, look, I love you. I don't want to fight with you. Please allow me the space. Let me get back to you on this. Whatever. Let me think about it. Whatever I've got to do, in a sense, to leave the situation. Now, there are times, excuse me, I swear it's the only time I fine all day, and then the moment I jump on here with the headset, got the hiccups and burping and whatever. It is what it is. Sometimes you can't get out of the argument. Sometimes you have to stay there and you have to finish it. Let's say you're dealing with police officers. I know for a lot of people, even if you're not committing a crime, that's still very scary because it's just a scary situation. Now, can you say, "Excuse me, I'm in fight or flight mode. Please go away and allow me to relax." And the cop probably won't even know what you're talking about and look at you like you're some crazy dude. And like I say, to some extent, we talk about, say, the magic side or the woo-woo side of it, and it's balancing the chakras and opening the energy and, some of this stuff that I would say is hard to measure. Not that we can't. Some people believe it, some people don't. But then we get some of this scientific stuff to start backing it up where we can map the sympathetic or map the parasympathetic nervous system, and we can say, oh, this is what's going on here, and then we can look into it. I was also, before I had a couple people come in and say hi, was talking about even a leadership course that I went to. I've heard it before, ropes course, or I think another one, and this is probably the company, not just a generalization. It's probably, but I think it's called Impact, a leadership training in and of itself. I've never been to Impact personally. I've gone to other ones, but man, it's fun, connecting with these people and making friendships, but it is very intense, if you will. There's one game in particular, and this is why I was hoping to maybe pull up some YouTube or something, is there's a one and it's called the Magic Canyon. Now, if you've never played it, to some extent I don't want you to look it up, because it's better sometimes when you walk into these, at least for me, blind, because I didn't know what was going on, and so I was more willing to, yeah, let's give this a try, and then you get into it and you get into that sympathetic nervous system and you start kind of stressing, I guess, if you will, and maybe not stressing, but just the games get stressful. And that's one of the cool things that I enjoyed about some of these leadership that I've done, is they'll play safe games with you, if you will, are designed to very much freak you out, get you maybe panicking. That might not be the correct word, but they get you outside your comfort zone. There you go. That's the best way I can say it. There's a couple other games. Another one, and this is not a game at all. Again, I wouldn't recommend you doing this without a proper facilitator. I'm not necessarily a facilitator. I would say I'm a facilitator in learning or in training. I have helped out with a couple events, still in training mode, I guess, and that's part of this channel, is in order to help me learn. If I can help somebody else learn, that's awesome. There's lots of different ones. Again, I said the one, and I was gonna maybe bring it up, but I don't. Yeah, it's better if you go into these blind, I think. My personal opinion. That's how I've gone into most of them. There was one that was really fun. They did, I don't remember, it was like 5 minutes of fame instead of the 15 minutes, and maybe it was 15 minutes or 10 minutes. It seems like it was only 5, very short. But we had a group of probably 100 people. It's somewhere between 60 and 100 people, I would say. Say 75 even, just to be on the safe side. And it was really fun because you got to pick one song and you got to be a rock star for, 5 minutes, 15 minutes, whatever. And so everybody else's job was to be a screaming, adoring fan. Your job was to envision that this is, the hero or the idol of your dreams. One way I pictured it was just, and some of you may not know this, but back in the day, there's screaming Beatles fans, and everywhere the Beatles went, there was just hordes of fans screaming and yelling and, so excited just to see the Beatles. And so that's kind of what our job was, as the audience members, was to scream and cheer and be very happy for the person on stage. And then everybody would slowly rotate out of the audience and onto stage, and then everybody gets to know what it feels like to be up there on stage and have that high energy directed at you. That, because it's intense. You get, again, I would roughly say 75 people, large group of people yelling and screaming at you, and a couple of them even knew my name because I was there with friends and family and my mentors, and so they're like, yeah, David, and it was cool, but it was also scary at the same time. And so that was something that we did to get outside our comfort zone to help us to grow. And so again, that's why I recommend these leadership programs. Looks like we have a new viewer. Welcome to the channel. How are you doing today? I hope everybody's having a wonderful day and doing good. Again, unfortunately, it's not always the case. I understand that. I've have my ups and downs, but anyway. But yeah, I was just talking about some leadership programs that I've been through, how they've helped me, and why I think they're so powerful, if you will. I had a couple other people, if you can see in the chat, asking about some other energy work. Again, to me, this is something that I want to promote and bring to the world. It's energy working, energy healing, however you want to say that. I'm not sure. I'm still learning it in a sense. I am not a doctor. I am not here to diagnose, to treat, to prescribe, any of that stuff. I'm just here to give you information. I encourage you to look this up on your own. If it vibes with you, or if it resonates with you, if what I'm saying feels like, hey, this is something to this, definitely please go look at this. Please go check this out. I started talking about a couple different modalities that I've heard of. The few that I've learned is bioenergetic synchronization technique, laughter yoga, family matrix. I want to say one other, but I'm not sure. It's just these are different modalities that I've come in contact with. Now, another great one that I'm not certified with was Rapid Eye, Reiki, and it's funny too because a lot of times when I talk about energy work, most people say, "Oh, like Reiki." Possibly. I don't. I've never done Reiki offhand, so I don't know yet. I'm still learning, I guess, if you will. So that's another thing as part of this. I talked earlier that a gentleman came in and was asking me about DMT and what I knew about that, and unfortunately, my knowledge was fairly limited. But I I want to learn, and so they gave me this information, and I'm gonna go look it up. One of them was a documentary called The Spirit Molecule. Awesome. I want to go watch that documentary. Apparently, it's also narrated by Joe Rogan, so that's awesome too. I was hoping to get to it last week, but I couldn't find it, so we'll see. But yeah, there's something to this. There is a part where the science and the magic is coming together, and they're both saying the same thing from what I understand, from what my research has read, or has taught me. Yeah. See, even then, I'm not the best. I'm not the perfectest speaker. I don't, I foul up my words. I'm still learning this, so I think it's awesome. But yeah, this is what I want to do for a living, in a sense, or this is what I'm trying to do. I'm trying to study this stuff. I'm trying to bring it to you, put it out there on the forefront so more people know about it. More people can look into this themselves and research it. Now, there is a part where, prescription pills, surgery, cutting, stabbing, burning, that kind of stuff is important. If you break your leg, you probably will need crutches, and that's fine as long as you don't live the rest of your life on the crutches. And that's how I view even this holistic, a lot of health through medicine, in a sense, is it's kind of a springboard. It's there to get you back up on your feet, but once you're on your feet, you probably don't need it. Now, I do not live with chronic pain. I do not have, I have some pain in my body, but it's usually from working out or, pulled something, just simple things. I have had major surgery, but I've not had, like pins and needles put in me. I have not had screws or just any of that stuff. So, again, from my place of talking and saying that people don't need pills and people don't need, this stuff is just from my experience. Now, again, I have had major surgery, and I am very thankful and grateful for the doctors and the nurses and everyone that performed it and was there on my behalf. I I can't even express how grateful I am for them. They saved my life. Again, I know people that has pins and needles in their arm because of broken bones, and they live in constant pain. And so, should they, take pain pills or smoke marijuana or do something for the pain? Probably. I'm again not a doctor. I'm not trying here to diagnose. I'm just trying to give you my information and from what I've seen and heard, if you will, and ask that you please do your own research and make a logical decision, I guess. Or sometimes not logic isn't always the best. Like, it will get you so far, but again, I mentioned earlier about you have this gut feeling or this intuition, if you will, and it's very interesting because I was learning that your heart and your intestine, again, I think it's your large, have brain cells in them, and so that gut feeling you get is kind of your third brain, if you will. Your lower in your guts, those brain cells are taking certain information and they're relaying it to you, and so you can act on it or you can ignore it. But from what I've done in research, this is what it's telling me, and so again, fascinating stuff. I remember even when I was in Chicago, I was with it was in break, and I'm playing on Facebook on my phone, and it talks about this amazing story, or miraculous, maybe not miraculous. I don't think that's the word, but anyway, fascinating story. And this guy dies or commits suicide, and he's an organ donor, so his heart gets given to this other gentleman. So we have gentleman A and gentleman B. So gentleman A dies or commits suicide. His heart goes to B. So gentleman B has gentleman A's heart in him. He ends up falling in love with the same girl that gentleman A, his actual first wife. So gentleman B remarries gentleman A's wife. And then a year or 2 years later, he ends up committing suicide in the exact same way that gentleman A did. And I thought, whoa, this is crazy. Like, what are the odds and coincidences of that? He gets his heart, and then he marries his widow, and then he ends up killing himself in the exact same way that that gentleman A did. And I was like, what the hell? So I took it over to some best practitioners, some master practitioners, and I asked them, I said, what is this? What do you guys make of this? And they said that's because there's more information going from the heart to the head than there is going from the head to the heart. And I was like, excuse me? Explain that some more. And then that's when they were talking about how you have brain cells in your heart or around your heart, if I understand that right. And so they are sending a certain information out, setting it up to your brain, if you will. And your brain's receiving this and acting accordingly, which I thought was very, very interesting. Like, wow. And now there was another study by a completely different doctor that I was reading about, and he was talking about every cell that goes through your body, blood cell, it gets an imprint or a stamp, if you will. The way that I pictured it is basically my heart as a mint, I guess, and all my blood cells that pass through it are like unminted coins in a sense, or and so then the heart stamping this imprint on them. Again, this is just how I understood what this doctor was saying, but your heart's going through an imprinting or stamping every cell that passes through it. And then that cell's going out through your body and taking that message. If you even thought of it as one of the old, I don't know if this is right, I want to say courier. No, courier is usually somebody that carries a package. I don't know. Yeah, if you've seen Corpse Bride or some of these other old movies, you've seen it. Somebody's walking around. I want to say courier, but I think that's more for delivering packages. Anyway, it doesn't matter. He's ringing the bell, and he's hear ye, giving the town the daily news. The king has declared, blah blah blah, whatever. So your heart is stamping your blood cells, and they're going throughout your body. And as they're going throughout their body, they're carrying this message. They're going around, saying, hear ye, this is what we've declared, in a sense. And again, this is how I understand it. An article, if you will, that I've read, that I came across, and it was awesome, fascinating stuff. And it was just saying that your heart imprints this information, this message on every cell, and then message carries that out through the body. And so I found that super fascinating, and I thought, I wonder if we can control the information, or say the print that the heart is stamping on all of the cells. And if there is a way, that's awesome. That would be super cool. And I kind of believe that is the case, when your thoughts, in a sense, is kind of what your heart's imprinting. And I don't know for sure. Maybe it's more of a vibrational frequency, which we'll pull this up right here. Levels of consciousness. We have the top levels up here, which is power, and then the lower levels, which is force. Power doesn't need to be justified. It doesn't need to force anything. It just happens. Where force does need justification. It's force. I mean, I'm going to force you to do this, or I'm going to empower you to do it. Well, when you're empowered to do it, you do it on your own, and you do it because you want to. When you're forced to do it, it's because there's a carrot or a stick, usually. That's something else that I go off of, is that levels of consciousness. Again, I found that in the book Power versus Force by David R. Hawkins. Great book. Highly recommend you check into that. It's awesome. I really enjoyed it and love it. Been studying this for about 5 years now. Which, that was another thing, that, if I'm saying this right, Spokenaut, one of my followers, seemed like an awesome person. They asked about Saturn's return at 30. And I didn't fully understand what they meant by that, but they were talking about it usually at the age of 20 or 30, your life either changes drastically or it doesn't. And it was interesting because when you first mentioned that, the only thing I could think of was this book called Iron John by Robert Bly, where he uses a metaphor from the Brothers Grimm's to talk about men, and mainly pretty much all men. Women could probably read this and get some good insight on men, and men I would highly recommend you read it. All guys, I even try to get my boys to read it. They're still a little young. Maybe they get a little bit older. But anyway, there's a part in the book where he talks about. I'm gonna give too much away. I want to help you to understand what I'm talking about, but without too much of the book, I guess. And maybe we'll get in a little bit of it, and then that might encourage you to read it. So there's a man named Iron John, or he's the Wild Man, and he's trapped in a cage, and he's in the middle of the courtyard of the castle. And again, the book goes into a lot more things like what the cage signifies, what being in the middle of the courtyard where everybody can see on display signifies. But the young prince is playing with his golden ball, and the golden ball rolls into the Wild Man or Iron John's cage, and the little boy comes up to him and says, "Please, may I have my ball back?" And Iron John says, "I'll give you back your ball if you let me out of this cage." And the little boy, scared and frightened, runs away. And that was the metaphor. Again, the cage being out in the or in the center of the castle square. There's other layers to this, which the book goes in and peels back the layers and talks about it. I'm not going to get too into that, but anyway, so with the golden ball rolls into his cage, little boy comes up, "May I please have my ball back?" Iron John replies, "If you let me out of this cage, I'll give you your ball back." The little boy, again being a little boy, let's say 8 years old, is scared and he runs off. Well, the book talks about this is a metaphor for men in their life, if you will, and most men will approach the cage 3 times. And again, this is just going off what the book says. And the first time when you're young, probably around 8 to 10 years old. The second time is usually around 20, 25, if I remember right. And then the third time is usually in their 30s or 40s. And so when he mentioned Saturn's return in your 30s, that's the only thing I could think of was this reference to the book. And so, again, the book talks about you go 3 times to visit Iron John. And most will never open the cage, and where you get the key and how to open the cage, that's a whole nother time, whole nother story. Again, read the book. Awesome book. If you really want to get into it, maybe I will later. But anyway, so few men will get the key, unlock it, and release this Wild Man. I will give you this a little bit so that way you go, oh, what happens to the boy, in a sense, what more of the story. So Iron John, when the little boy releases him, he starts walking back to the forest, starts leaving the castle, and the little boy starts crying, and he turns around and says, "Well, little boy, what's wrong? Why are you crying? And you got your gold ball back." And he says, "Yeah, but my parents are going to beat me when they find out that I've let you out, that you're missing." So Iron John picks up the little boy, puts him on his shoulder, and carries him off to the forest. So the little boy goes and lives in the forest with Iron John. What happens in the forest? You'll have to read the book. It's great book. Again, I would highly recommend it. I personally did not know who Robert Bly was or much about the book. Apparently, he is a gentleman who was big into men's groups and men's movement, if you will. It's not opposed femininity or the feminine movement. It's just saying that us men need to come together in similar, maybe like-minded ideas, which I don't know if this came from Robert Bly or where. I got this from another gentleman, singer-songwriter, great guy. His name's Sean Galloway. But he puts together men's circles where they meet once a week. Men just come together, and it's total anonymity. Kind of, a lot of times when I explain this, people are like, "Oh, like AA?" Not like AA at all. It's kind of like AA as far as a support group, as far as anonymity. If somebody comes in and talks about their wife or their financial problems, you're not going to go air that on Facebook. You're going to keep that in the room and protect that person's privacy. But it's a way that men can get together and talk, and I've been a part of a couple men's circles. In fact, I even started one in my area. It worked for a little while, and then we kind of fell apart. got busy, whatnot. It really boiled down to finding a place to host it. Either people wanted us to pay for the space, or we didn't have a good space. So anyway, yeah, that was one thing, is where to host it, where to have it. If you have a church, or even sometimes a library or something that can do it, that's awesome. We were trying to meet also at like 8 o'clock to 9 o'clock at night, so all libraries were pretty much closed by then. And yeah, anyway, I've been a part of a couple of them. They are definitely very powerful. They can be great means of support. I know even with some of us, we don't necessarily have the family support that we'd like. Two brothers, sister, mom and dad, that kind of stuff. So sometimes these men's circles can be awesome support. They can help bring you together, if you will. So it looks like this is about all the time I have for today. Again, for those of you that have come in here and said hello, asked some great questions, I really appreciate you. Hopefully you'll be back tomorrow. For the follow, thanks you. Can't talk. Thank you again. I really appreciate that. Yeah. So again, thank you. I wish you all the best. Have an amazing day.